Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and joined by my usual podcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw. I played for years with the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. And when he's with the Kings, he was on the number 2 power play unit. Got to play with Gretzky on the power play. I can actually confirm that.
It's funny you bring that up. My old partner from the Kings is Tim Waters, a great guy. Played at Michigan Tech, one of the best team players I've ever seen. We were talking the other day. We had played in not played. Ice Hockey in Harlem is a great charity thing they have here in New York. And way back in like 1989 or 88, we were playing with the Kings, and we were in New York. And we, as a team, we all went out. The first event they had with Ice Hockey in Harlem was skating in Central Park with a bunch of kids in the program there. So we were part of that. And Tim and I were laughing about. We had Brian Maxwell was the defensive coach, and Robbie Ftorek was coaching, and they loved Tim and Tom. It wasn't that they loved Tom; it wasn't that they loved Tim. They loved Tim and Tom, and it was kind of got to be funny because we had one game where they dressed like 7 defensemen, and Tim and Tom went out every other shift, and it was just the other guys were. It got to be comical. It was like Brian Maxwell just loved the way he was a gritty guy. You know, we were 2 gritty guys and playing that way. So we actually did play the power play a little bit too, which was
I remember, and I don't remember where I was, but I was on the road and I was watching. It was an off day, so it must have been during the playoffs. And ESPN was showing old hockey games, and it was an early game when Gretzky's might have been the first. It wasn't the first game, but it was a game that after Gretzky had gone to L.A. And I'm watching this game, and of course, I had covered Tom when he was with the Rangers, but I didn't recall, what he had done when he was in L.A. But I'm watching, and they go on a power play. And, of course, Tom wasn't on the first power play, but on the second power play. And, of course, Wayne Gretzky was on both the first power play and the second power play. But when the second power play unit came out, there was Tom right out there on the point. I actually called Tom. I think it was 10 o'clock at night. Yeah. I remember calling you and saying, I'm watching this game, and you're on a power play with Wayne Gretzky. Like, what's that all about? So,
it's fun. Actually, I scored my first goal in the NHL other than shooting in my own net, but the first official goal against another team was in Vancouver on the power play. Freddie Shero put me in front of the net, and it was assisted by Barry Beck and Phyllis Vizito. So it was, I got a plaque of that and everything too. So that was pretty cool.
Wow. Do you have much memorabilia in your home?
A little bit, not too much. I've got the jerseys behind me and some trophies and pucks and stuff. But my parents actually did a really good job. They've kept a lot of scrapbooks. When they passed away, I got them. And I didn't. It's funny. You look back at those things, you forget a lot of the things that had happened. Right, things as a kid. Pictures and stuff. So it is. I'm glad they saved it, and I make sure I do that with my kids too, because I'm sure you like that with your kids too, right? They may not think of it as much when they're younger, but later on in life, when they see that stuff, it's pretty cool. So
for sure. Well, Tom, let's get started. I wanted to start with the World Juniors. It's so funny about that in America. I think we're starting to understand about it more, but in the old days, we didn't understand at all. And it was such a huge event in Canada, and it's just part of the holiday tradition in Canada to watch the World Junior Championships. Yeah. I always said I think that always gave, not that they needed it, but it gave. Here comes my pit bull.
That's all right. That's okay.
Is it just an extra layer of motivation knowing that so many millions of Canadians were going to be watching the boys, over the holidays, and they already had a terrific team because Canada has a lot of top prospects, and then they had, knowing that they had to play at their best because everyone was watching, and now the American program is much stronger. But what I really want to talk about today, because I think it's really remarkable and doesn't get enough credit, going into tonight's game against Russia for Sweden, they've won 54 consecutive preliminary round games.
Sweden
wow. Yeah, it's a really impressive record. And, that doesn't mean they won the gold every year, because obviously they haven't. In fact, they haven't won a gold since 2012. But I think it sort of shows the consistency of their program. And I just finished writing a piece for this betting site that I write for, sportsbettingdime.com. And I was just talking about, you can never take Sweden lightly. Yeah. And it's not just the World Junior Championships either. I think this is true in the Olympics and the World Championships. Yeah. Their players are always highly skilled, number one. But more importantly, is they're disciplined, and they pay attention to defense. They're all around players. Swedes, when they come over, they're grounded in how to be successful hockey players.
Absolutely. Real professional guys, great team players. One of the best team players I ever played with was Jan Eriksson with the Rangers. And he was just one of those guys that you loved him as a person. He was showed up every day with the work ethic, all about the team all the time. Steady player, great player. It was funny. One of the worst when we started was Thomas Sandstrom. So I think I've told the story before, but when he first came over, he didn't speak English at all, where some of those guys like Jan Eriksson did. So it was easier for them to kind of get involved. But Thomas always played on the edge. And when he first came over, he would play on the edge even in our practices. Like he played the same way in practice as he did as a game, which is that's what you want. You want guys getting ready to go. But he was on the edge as a player. So we didn't like him at first. We were like, who's this Swede? What's he think he's doing out there and everything? And he was always starting things on the ice. I mean, one game I had to jump in and jump on Scott Stevens' back because he was going to beat him up. And but it's the funniest thing. Once he got going and understood English, we were totally wrong about him. He was a fantastic teammate. He was just this ultra competitive guy. So we had this vision that the Swedes were like Jan Eriksson was still a good competitive guy, but not a real physical player, not a real gritty guy. But still, listen, he still went and did his job. And Thomas wasn't like that. He was a nasty player. But once we got to know him, and I got to play with him at the end of my career in LA as well, just a fantastic guy. I don't think there's any Swedes that you didn't look at that you just didn't say he was a good guy. It was more than just being a good guy. Like they understood, like you said, the importance of being that team player. It didn't matter how good you were as a player. Anders Hedberg was the same way. Ulf Nielsen, just really good team guys. But like I said, very talented and prepared. You're right, in shape all the time. You know, game time they were always ready to play. They were great guys to play with.
Yeah, for sure. And I think because of that, like. The Americans are considered a 1.5 goal favorite in that game, but I think that game's a toss-up at best.
Yeah, totally.
To be honest with you, I would take Sweden to win that game.
Yeah. But it is funny as you touched on like the Canadian thing too, and how the U.S. has come more like Canada. Like in Canada, that World Junior thing, I think it's a combination of the fact that they're still not pros yet, right? They're just young kids, and that's it sounds kind of corny, but that's what hockey's all about. And I think the U.S. has gotten more of that too, where it's the young kids playing the game, learning things from playing the game of hockey. So that's still part of it, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own in Canada too. It's almost like they can have in the past they could have the less talented team, but it meant so much to them that they gave that extra effort. There's some games in the World Juniors in the past were just like vicious, like these kids were just not going to quit. They had to win. That's the tradition in Canada. You've got to win, and they did whatever they had to do to win.
Well, what's interesting to me, I think that tournament is interesting for a couple of different levels. First of all, you just have international competition, and I enjoy international competition. I love the nationalistic pride of Russia versus the Czech Republic and Canada versus Russia, and U.S. versus. I like all that. And then the second element of all this that makes the World Junior Championship so interesting is from the scouting perspective, from the prospect perspective. There's not been any players. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm sure there have been, but there haven't been many star players in the NHL that haven't come through the World Junior at some point. And guys who have dominated there. But
it's funny though, Kim. Do you remember? There's some players. I try to think of some guys that maybe didn't. So on both ends, maybe were star players in the NHL, but didn't really light it up at the World Juniors. They played okay, but then there's some players that played fantastic at the World Juniors that were maybe just run of the mill, third or fourth line players at the National Hockey League, right? I mean,
the one guy that comes to mind for me from the American perspective, Patrick Eaves, was a real dominant World Junior championship player, and he was a solid, dependable NHL player, but he wasn't a star,
Totally.
And he did light it up. But if you look back, like Modano and Roenick were on the same line together, and I think it was in Alaska. My memory serves me. And they were just a great, player. And I think that was then Bure and Fedorov era. They were the dominant players as well. Usually, you can project stardom for stars there. But you're right; it doesn't always, fit the bill.
Especially sometimes the guy will go over there a couple of times and play. Right? Maybe the second time it's kind of like the first time it's more exciting. He plays better, and the second time. Right, it just hasn't been as big a thing to him. But yeah, listen, either way, it's such an honor to play in it, right? Like there's a world championships typically at the end of every year, and there's a lot of guys who will kind of bow out of that because they've had a long NHL season, and it's over in some country really doesn't, the tournament isn't as big a thing. But the World Junior, to be able to compete for your country, it's not the Olympics, but it's pretty important, and it's good.
Well, and there's been some controversy this year because, there's controversy. Controversy is not the right word, but there's consternation every year over teams allowing their players to go. And, this year Kirby Dach went over there and fractured his wrist. Now he's going to be out, 5 months.
Right.
And that's such a devastating loss for the Blackhawks.
So now the question is, then, should they let him go? Right?
Yeah. I always I think you got to look at it case by case and how much they're going to play. Like, I understood Hughes was still eligible, but the Devils, he's their star. They can't let him go over there and risk him getting hurt. I totally understand that. Should Toronto have let Robertson go over? Right. He was going to be one of USA's better players.
So the Rangers with Lafreniere, right? I mean, they didn't let him go.
Yeah, no, that's right. But Lafreniere projects to be in their top 6. Right.
But Kirby Dach, where's he? He's at least a third line guy with Chicago, right?
I think this year he would have been in their top 6.
Yeah. So I listen. Apparently, from what I heard on the radio, he went to the Chicago Blackhawks and asked to go over. He wanted to go.
He wanted to play. Yeah. No, that's right. And I respect guys that want to do that. You want to play big games if you're a hockey player. I remember it was Jack Ferraro would talk about the frustration when he would be involved in the U.S. program at the World Championships, and he'd call guys to try to get them to play in the World Championships after they got they didn't make the playoffs in the NHL, and they'd always say, "Well, it's been a long season, I'm weary." And Jack just said, when you're a hockey player, you're geared toward playing hockey until June, that's the objective. So if it's April, you're still going. You're still going strong. Why not play 7 or 8 more games at a high level of competition? And
it's a fun experience too, right? You go over to another country, and I remember I think I told the story, but Chris Mason, I was representing, goaltender, played really well in St. Louis and Nashville, and it was the year Steve Yzerman was the general manager of Team Canada to go over the World Championships, and Chris Mason had me call Steve Yzerman to say, listen, he wants to go. I remember the reception from Steve was like, really? He was excited in a good way that a player was calling and asking to go over. So it's you do see it from a player's end. It's been a long year, and they say, okay, how's this going to benefit my career? What if I go over there and I blow up my knee and now it hurts my career? That's the kind of stuff. But in Dach's case too, where Dach gets hurt playing in a game in the World Juniors, he could get hurt the same way at practice or training camp with the Chicago Blackhawks. So really,
for sure. I understand from an intellectual and emotional perspective that sometimes it's not an easy decision for a variety of reasons. And, there's, family life concerns as well, but for the younger players, I've never understood why they just didn't say, sign me up, and there are guys like that, Dylan Larkin, I've actually said this to him that, 1 year, Sidney Crosby wanted to go over and play in the World Championships and call a bunch of guys up. So let's all get together and go over there and try to win a World Championship.
Right.
And I told Dylan Larkin, I said, you could be that guy for America because he loves to play. He's a sign me up guy like Jack Johnson was. Jack Johnson, if he was out of the playoffs, he was playing in the World Championships.
Yeah. Patrick Kane really did it last time too, didn't he?
Patrick Kane is that type of guy. And, that actually is, it's so, and we're going to talk about Jonathan Toews in a minute, but, the irony of all this, Patrick Kane has got himself in trouble a few times, but as a player, there's no denying his, he's just such a competitive guy.
And he's matured into that too. Right? You're right. He did do some things he shouldn't have done, particularly off the ice. But even on the ice when he was younger, he wasn't this complete player.
I think he's been competitive this whole career. Yeah. I would argue with you a little bit on that. I would say that, he always gives everything he has on the ice. It was the other part of his game, which is off the ice, where, he had some difficulty. But, I remember talking to Kenny Hitchcock about him, and he used to marvel. He said, when you're playing against the Hawks, that every shift Patrick Kane is out there, he's going to be dangerous because, that's just what he wants to do. He wants to be the best player on the ice.
Yes, and he wants to make the biggest play, right? He makes
he does. Yeah, he is. He rises up, and he does all those things. But going back to Sweden a little bit too, we haven't. The point I want to make is because we just lost, and I haven't talked about him on the podcast. Art Berglund passed away over the holidays, and he was, for those who don't know the name, he was sort of the national team director for USA Hockey for a long, long time. And in the early years, it was a struggle to recruit guys to go and play at the international level because America wasn't very competitive.
Right.
And so, you'd get guys, and I remember I would talk to them because I was always kind of trying to, piece together who the team was going to be because no one was paying attention. It was information I could provide that no one else was. So I'd call him multiple times, and he'd tell me, I just hunted down a goalie who was on the beach already, and he really didn't want to go, but I talked him into it. I know one year, I don't remember what the it must have been the World Championships, but their third goalie was a goalie not from an NHL team, but Bucks Unfinished Furniture, which was the senior team. Is that right? The senior team in Minnesota at the time. I think I got the name right. Bucks Unfinished, Unvarnished, something. But it was Bucks for sure out of Minnesota. It was a senior team. And that was like the third goalie because that was the best Art could find. But, he really worked at it. Art was a remarkable guy, and he authored one of my favorite lines about as America started to get stronger. And a lot of the reason they got stronger, as we all know, is the expansion of the NHL into non-traditional markets, created youth hockey, and the hockey belt has expanded. Like, we're taking so many players out of California now.
Right.
And we had, Zucker's out of Vegas, the Pittsburgh player. We're getting players out of Texas and Florida and all over
Arizona, Austin Matthews, Arizona. Yeah,
Arizona. Yeah, is another great example. And Austin Matthews, this is sometimes is lost on people. Austin Matthews' grandparents live in Mexico.
Yeah,
his mother's parents, live in Mexico. So we're getting players really out of Mexico. I mean, that's his mother's descent. I mean, that's not true, but the point is that we're making all that. So, but what Art Berglund said, we were talking about it one time. He goes, I guess what you could say is one of the best things we got going as a country is not only this expansion, but what else goes well for us is Canadian players like American women. And his point at all that is that they come settle over here. And they end up with American wives, and their kids are brought up here. We've had a number of sons of former Canadian players who have, are Americans.
Very true.
Like Zach Parise. His dad was a Canadian, settled in America, and he was a top player. We've had the Nystrom. Bobby Nystrom's kid was an American.
Was it Dave Gagne was a Canadian? His son Sam Gagne played, right?
Yeah, but he was a Canadian.
Was Sam a Canadian?
Yeah, Sam was Canadian. Yeah, but Jeff Brown's kid, Logan Brown, is an example of that. So there are a lot of players, kind of like that. But that was one of the quotes.
Canadian hockey players like American women. That's a pretty good line.
Right? And then before we jump over and talk about Jonathan Toews, I also want to go back to when I started out talking about Sweden. And it made me remember this. We haven't talked about Henrik since the announcement came, and he made the announcement himself, and it's valve replacement. I mean, that's what he said. And boy, that just is stunning news. We've had.
How long is that something that's a condition from birth, or is it developed?
I just don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about it to comment, but I know that's, we've had players that have had, you have to have, they have trouble with their heart rhythm and those kind of things, but you can, fix that kind of stuff. This is, much more serious stuff. And, I think obviously we'll probably, wonder and, how did this get missed all along, if that's the case. But again, I don't know. Maybe that is something that can happen, dramatically. So, well, we'll have to wait and see how that unfolds. But all the bottom line is we just wish the best for.
Definitely. And you think that's, I mean, I hate to say it, this is probably the end of his career too, and I would assume.
Sure seems like it. I just can't imagine, especially at his age.
Yeah.
Like if he was 24, 25, maybe I know
I know he never won a cup, but if you're a hockey player and you were to start your career and then look back at your career when it's all over and say to yourself, did I get the most out of my career? Did I really give it everything I got? He's one guy that you got to say he got the most out of his career. He was fantastic. Like his work ethic, his preparation, like he was almost like too intense sometimes, like as far as like yelling at his defenseman and all that kind of stuff. But it was all with good intentions, right? He just wanted to win so bad. He was, I mean, the way he carried himself off the ice, we joke around sometimes about his hair and the suits and everything, but I think that was all like he said to himself, like, I want to be the best I can be, right? With everything that I do. And I totally admire that. I thought he just had a fantastic career. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, he has had a fantastic career. And I don't think it's not, well, let's put it this way: when they're sitting around in that room, because we won't always do these votes on Zoom. They'll go back at the Hall of Fame, right. Sitting in a big conference room around the table. When they're just talking about Henrik Lundqvist credentials, nobody's going to say, "Yeah, but he didn't win a cup."
Yeah,
nobody will say that.
No, there'll be some people that say it. I'm not saying
they won't say that with him because he had too many wins, too much international success, too big of an aura. Everybody acknowledged when he played that he was one of the best.
And the way, like here in New York too, like there's the Derek Jeters, the Eli Mannings, those kind of guys. Like he's in that category. Like he just was an icon, just not just at Madison Square Garden, but in New York City itself, which is really something. I mean, there's a lot going on here in the city. So he was good. And again, like I said, I really admire him because you could tell he just wanted to be the best that he could possibly be. His work ethic was just incredible. He was something else.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like you ought to be able to say the person's name and know if he's a Hall of Famer without looking at stats.
Yeah.
Like if I say in baseball, Reggie Jackson.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Mr. October. He's a guy. If I say in football, Peyton Manning.
Yeah, that is true.
There's no question. Now the problem is there's some people that are right on the border of that when you say their name. Like I say someone's name and you go, maybe.
Very true. Very true.
Anyway, all right. Let's talk about Jonathan Toews. Why don't you provide the news, and then we'll discuss.
So he's now has come up with a statement of his own saying that he won't be attending training camp. I think this quote was he's feeling lethargic and tired all the time, and they really don't know. It's just a medical condition. They haven't really figured out what it is. So you kind of wonder. I mean, is that a COVID related thing? It doesn't. I don't know all the symptoms of.
Well, I don't know, obviously, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, we've had issues. Bar Epstein issues where people have been chronically fatigued all the time. It could have something to do with the immune system and all the rest. So it could be anything. Really at this point, but it's always alarming when they can't figure it out.
That is the scariest part, especially right now at these times with the virus out there and they can't figure out what it is.
Yeah,
and they can rule out the virus, but
you can, but unless you've had it, and then they have what long haulers syndrome, where it's some elements of it stick with you for a long time. Just to
go back real quick, we've got a gentleman here, Troy Marvin, who had aortic valve replacement surgery. And it takes a full year to get back to 100% for my veteran heart surgeon, 30 years. Condition can be from birth or it develops.
Or it develops. So, okay. So that's the useful information here.
Yeah,
so
thanks, Troy.
It could have just happened. We appreciate your input on that because we obviously don't know. But, with Toews, I think, when you're an athlete and you break your hand, you're going to be out 3 or 4 weeks unless you don't have surgery. When you have surgery, that means it's more complicated, obviously, and you got to have pins in it and so forth. But so we know how long it takes to heal, an MCL. But with something like this, when you don't know what it is, like the Blackhawks don't know if he'll be back in game 2 or game 56 or not at all.
Oh, and Susan Brooks comes up with a good point here too. Looks like the Panthers are allowing all their fans into the building. That's awful. I shouldn't say that. It's terrible.
Yeah, allowing 5,000. Well, I mean, it's Florida. Florida has been acted differently than other states, to be sure. So, and we all kind of suspected that if there was going to be a state that that would allow it, it would be, Florida.
Man, but we really haven't even gotten going with the vaccine that much yet, and to have 5,000 people inside a stadium.
It wouldn't be me.
Yeah,
I would not. Just because what's going on. I mean, I just read this morning about the poor gentleman in Louisiana elected to Congress and 41 years old and passed away.
Yeah.
And you just can't. You can't be certain. You can't be sure. We just think of it as well, we're losing our elderly. And as one of those, I don't think that's a good situation that we're losing our elderly.
Yeah. I know.
But this is a relatively young man. Yeah. And, we don't know his medical history, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. What matters is
why put, I know there's some revenue from 5,000 people, but I mean, really, is it worth the risk this early to have, wow, that's
this is a business, that's what they say. And that's, I guess, what we have to remember, but when there are lives at stake and, and it hasn't, it's gone like what they did to get this vaccine. What did President Trump call it? The warp speed or warp drive or whatever it was. Yeah. I mean, it's remarkable, for him to come up with this so quickly. But, it hasn't gone smoothly in the distribution. And, we had hoped to have 20 million people vaccinated by the end of the year. And now, from what I saw on television in the last 48 hours, it seems to me we're only at like 2 million or so. So we just need more time. I mean, that's the issue.
Like I said, like for 5,000 people, I mean, the revenue. Okay, yes, there is some revenue there, but is it really that much of a difference maker that's worth risking lives out of?
Well, I guess over 28 home games, let's see their average ticket price just for the sake is $50.
Right.
So if it was $100, it'd be 50,000 a game. So over the course.
So let's say that everybody let's say each one spends $200 between the ticket and concessions, all that kind of stuff. So that's $100,000? No, $1 million. Right?
No, it's 100. It's 100. 200 over 5,000.
Right. $1 million. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not. I know. Here's what we want to. Former Ranger and Tampa Bay Lightning, Ryan Callahan. No surprise, announced his retirement. He missed the whole year last year, right? He was out. Yeah, he had some injury or something.
Jeez, I've just lost track of it all. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I think he did. Pretty sure this whole year. Yeah. You know what? We talked about Henrik Lundqvist getting the most out of his career. Ryan Callahan's another guy that's like that too. I mean, he really wasn't. I mean, again, total compliment to him. He really wasn't the most talented guy, but he played hard.
Yeah, he kind of defines the energy player. You like to have him out running around because he gave your team a lot of energy, and he scored some goals.
Yeah,
so it was good. Really, it was a good player.
Definitely. So New Year's Eve is coming up. You'll be staying up all night till like 4 or 5 in the morning, probably, or what?
Yeah. I'll be lucky I make it 4 or 5 in the afternoon without a nap. For sure. I mean, I don't know. We're gonna have to play it by ear, I guess. To see what's happening.
New Year's Eve's never been my thing. I just, I don't. It's not that big of a deal to me. I guess I know it's another reason to have some fun. But
right, but if you stay up to midnight, I mean, you're gonna get 2 hours of sleep.
Well, I was thinking maybe I'll just go for one of those times where sometimes I try to challenge myself and spend the whole just not go to bed at all. Just. Yeah.
Does that work when you challenge yourself like that?
Oh, I have done it. Yes. Yeah. It's good. I mean, it's actually, it gets you going. So, I mean, it's like almost like because of the challenge of it. I've done things like where I've taken a red eye back from LA or something like that. And I get home and I feel like, okay, I've got to go right to work, and it's actually, I have some great days like that. Now you're tired the next night and get a good night's sleep, but yeah.
Jeez. That's, I won't be challenging myself to go all.
You're talking to a guy who drives down when it's 35 degrees outside, drives down the highway with his windows open just to show how long he can do that. So,
wow. Well, I was once described by a friend of mine as a person that, what's interesting about Kevin Allen is he can go to bed at 9 o'clock at night, or he can, drive all night to go see a hockey game. And that's what's true for the longest time. So
Definitely. All right. So I won't see you until next year then.
That's true.
Yeah. All the fans out there too.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it up, and we wish everyone a happy new year, and we'll be back again after the new year.
All right. See you guys. See you next Monday.
See you later, guys. Hello.